We had a good night's sleep in this beautiful Scandinavian, very light and bright night. We start this morning's Tutti Frutti session with architecture and governance in large IT structure projects. It's a talk to be delivered by Paul Brand, who is from a consulting company, Stratix Consulting from Netherlands. So Paul, welcome. Use this one or?
Sure. Good morning. Let's see whether this works first of all.
That's a good question. Nope, I don't think it works.
It worked earlier. Tested it.
Is the power on?
I tested it earlier, but of course now it doesn't work. Well,
Switched it maybe off.
now it's on.
Now it's on.
Now it's on.
Yes.
Yeah. So, okay. Let me start just by introducing myself briefly. Most of you don't know me. My name is Paul Brand. I'm a consultant. I work for a small consulting company in the Netherlands, Stratix Consulting, about 20 people. All of our work is in telecommunications, ICT, and related subjects, both in terms of strategy, policy, and in execution. We work for commercial companies and for governments and semi-governments. My own background, telecoms and networking. I've been involved in telecoms for like 25 years. And I've been involved in some very large projects involving tens, hundreds of millions of euros. And in the course of some of those projects, I think I learned a few things about IT, obviously, about telecoms. Some of those things that I learned are already obsolete again. But also about governance, about how you manage these big projects and how the interaction between different entities can work, should work. And today I just want to share some of those ideas with you. Feel free to interrupt, by the way, if there's a question on anything. So today's about governance, governance models. Central, decentral, project organizations, line organizations, and a bit about architecture. Organic, your own architectures versus centrally controlled, which again has something to do with governance. So let's talk about governance. Let's start by definition, really. In my mind, governance means finding the balance between different interests. Governance is about aligning interests, making sure that everybody tries to reach the same things, but you can never all have the same interest. There's always going to be divergence. That's unavoidable. So good governance is about how you bring those differences into the open, how you make sure that you get the proper discussion at the proper level and get an efficient decision-making process at the same time. I found a slightly more formal definition. There's a lot of them around. A set of structures, processes, policies by which the functions in an organization are directed and controlled to yield business value and mitigate risk. So what does that mean? It means you need a structure that gets discussion in the right place and gets the balance of power between the interests that always exist. So why are there different interests? Well, sometimes there's personal, sometimes there are conflicts that are very specific to a certain environment, but there's a few generic ones that always happen. There tends to be, in any collaboration, a tension between service delivery, making sure that the services are delivered to the users, and innovation, between vision and execution, between central and decentral control. I'll come back to each of these. That's normal. That's completely normal. And there's nothing wrong with those tensions. But the thing about governance is that you need to find a model that makes those tensions explicit and finds the right balance. So service delivery and innovation. The service delivery organization should have as its first priority to make sure that users get the services they need. The infrastructure is there to serve the users don't want disruptions. Innovation is a risk. It can disrupt the service delivery. So you should, of course, you should innovate, and yes, service delivery organizations will want to innovate, but slowly and incrementally. Furthermore, most users are not prepared to pay for innovation. They want the best services they can get for as little money as possible, but they're not interested in paying for the actual innovation. Of course, they would like to have the results though. So the natural tendency of any service delivery organization, and rightfully so, is to stick to what works. Do what works, make small incremental improvements, but don't rock the boat, don't change things too much. And of course, innovation tends to be the exact opposite. Try new approaches, different models, different things, not just different technology, but different business models, different forms of organization, different everything. So there's a conflict there. What tends to work is to separate service delivery from innovation in the organization. For service delivery, you need a permanent institution, something that's a constant, operation centers that work, that have their processes well worked out, focused on providing good services, focused on cost reduction, obviously, because we all are short of funds, controlled by users, because in the end that's the ones that you serve, funded by users preferably. And I know that is in research e-infrastructures not always the case, but the most sensible way to make sure that the service delivery function is controlled properly is if the people who are dependent on it are also the ones paying for it. Innovation, if you really want innovation, you need much more temporary setups. You need to start something, get it done, and stop it again. Have multiple in parallel. An innovation project should be looking at new possibilities, new structures, which means perhaps making some of the existing ones obsolete. That's fine. Innovation should be controlled by users, but not by all the users together, because most of them won't be interested. Innovation should be controlled by the most advanced users, the ones who really see the new possibilities, the visionaries. And I think innovation most of the time will have to be funded by public institutions, because they're working for the common good, and each individual user won't be too much interested. So what you get, you need a service delivery organization, multiple innovation projects, somebody somewhere to do the coordination between them, controlled by users, and to a lesser degree by the funding organizations. And this happens to fit very well with the recommendations from the GIAN expert group, which the e-IRG also endorsed. And I understand that the Commission is also working on making those recommendations part of Horizon 2020 and even the intermediate project GN3+, which is coming up. In a structure like this, you will still have heated discussions between these elements. That's fine. But at least you can see the discussions, get them out in the open, which of course means that you do need to have separate people, at least at the governance level, doing these things. I know that's always a problem in any environment. There's never enough good people to run all these things separately. But at the governance level, if you don't have different people here, then you get heated discussions within a person rather than between people. And you don't get it out in the open. You don't get people to get a fruitful discussion. The next tension is between vision and execution. In any major innovation project, or in any project really, there is a tension between the people who just want to get the job done and the people who have yet another bright idea of how it could be done. And again, you need a balance. If you focus on execution, then after 3 years, 4 years, whatever the project takes, you will have exactly what you defined 4 years ago, which by that time is obsolete. And if you give the power to the visionaries, then you will always be pursuing the next beautiful, bright thing, and you will never actually have any results. So you need a balance. People who are working from the vision will always be looking at not what's currently possible, but what could be possible somewhere in the future. But the project manager, the ones who are responsible for delivering the project, they will have to want to focus on what's there, or at least what's going to be there in the very near future, and that's pretty much guaranteed to be there by that time. So again, there's a a tension between them. And to control that kind of tension, I think it's important that the project manager in any project is responsible for staying on scope, on budget, on time. But there is a steering group above him who is able to change all that. And that steering group needs to be affected by the strategy component, obviously, by the service delivery organization, because they will have to work with what comes out of it in the end, but mostly by advanced users who have ideas where they want to go. And if you can find a balance at the steering group level, then at least within the project, people can just work on what they've been given as a scope rather than trying to reinvent their own work. If you have a mechanism like this, that means that each of the entities that is affected by the outcome of the project has a voice in controlling the project and its scope. And it leaves the project manager free to manage the scope that he's been given. And then, of course, we have the tension between central and decentral. Professor Obel mentioned it yesterday. It's always a challenge to see at what level do you organize a certain function, a certain activity. In some cases, central control may be more effective. You may get more consistency, interoperability, avoid some duplication. And in other cases, you may want to have more flexibility, which usually implies having smaller entities and more of them. In innovation too, there tends to be a tension between controlling things centrally or very much decentrally. If you look at centrally managed innovation programs, you get a large consistent program, all going in one direction, everything is defined up front, there's no duplication of effort. It sounds very effective. If you organize it more decentrally, you end up with multiple initiatives that sometimes collaborate, sometimes conflict, sometimes compete. You've got duplication, you've got different approaches that compete. And the results may not even interoperate, so you'll have to arrange for interoperability after the fact. So the central approach would seem a bit more efficient. But is it? Well, maybe you remember the PTTs. Well, they were very good at central approaches. They were central, state-owned monopolies, and they moved fairly slowly. There was no real incentive to innovate. It's not that they didn't want to innovate, some of them had great research labs. But it took forever to get anything that came out of the labs into the actual operation. It was too big to actually implement effective change. The PTTs could invent VoIP. I think they could have. And they could have implemented it in their networks. Would have worked. And the network would have looked exactly the same as it did before, just with different nodes with different names on them. But they wouldn't invent Skype because they would have made themselves obsolete. And that's where innovation comes. So I think innovation is much better served by smaller projects competing, trying different approaches, and then trying to resolve how you get the different results interoperable. If you get a completely organic model and lots of small initiatives, lots of ideas, everybody competing for funding as well, everybody having to arrange interoperability with his neighbor because nobody's arranged it centrally, you can wonder would that scale. And I've got one example here of a network that got fairly chaotic after a while because everybody just did his own thing basically, although there were some central agreements on how to make things interoperate. But there was no central control. In fact, there was so little central control in this particular network that the author of this map put a disclaimer under it saying he didn't know whether this really was the map because nobody knew. This, of course, was the ARPANET in 1977, the predecessor to the internet. It grew organically with very little central control, and I would argue that if there had been a central control and if it had been all one big managed project, it wouldn't have happened at all. So let's look at the internet as it is today. We still have very little central control. There are some centrally agreed standards, making sure that you have interoperability between networks and interoperability at the end-to-end. You have central control for naming and addressing, so that everybody can agree what a certain IP address means and where it is. But that's it. Nobody tells anybody, well, you have to bold another link here because then the network looks better, or then the topology works better. Everybody can decide for his own parts. The internet is completely agnostic of content and application, or at least it should be, and is driven by user requirements. Nobody designed the internet. Nobody decided what was good for the user and how it was going to be built. It came up, bottom up. And then, of course, in order to make all these little islands, these little networks interoperate, somebody invented the internet exchange. Before that, the incumbents had their exchanges, and you ended up being dependent on the incumbent anyway. But open exchanges changed all that, got rid of the monopolies that still existed, and made for a really decentralized internet. So we have an IETF and an ICANN, but nothing else. So, what does that mean to the architecture of research and dedication networks? And I'm concentrating on networks here, although some of the things that I've said might also apply to other parts of the infrastructure, but networks just happens to be my specialty, so I'll stick to that. Very little central control. The network architecture for research networks, well, it's multi-domain by nature. The universities run their own networks, nobody tells them what to do, and somehow they have to be connected through NRENs, who somehow have to connect with each other, and with the global networks. So it's multi-domain. Centrally controlled, centrally agreed standards, not controlled. Centrally agreed standards, everybody has an input. That's how the internet works, that's how IETF worked. In some cases that's not enough because there is no IETF for light paths, so somebody invented the glyph, which very much fulfills that function, helped by the OGF. Content application agnostic, same as the rest of the internet. That means no acceptable use, there is nobody controlling at the top level what kind of content people should put on it. It should be the users, the universities, the research institutes, who define what goes on to that network. Which of course does mean that you have an acceptable user policy. You don't let just anybody on the network, but not an acceptable use policy. Driven by user requirements. At some time all the NRENs only had IP, and that was fine for most applications. Now we have hybrid networks that allow for light paths for the big research applications, because that's what the user needed. And maybe there will be new things that they come up with that we will have to serve. And open exchange points. Internet exchanges already exist, good. Now we need something for the light paths, and we've already seen some open light path exchanges that fulfill that function. So, summarizing, instead of this kind of structure, which is the hierarchical, central controlled, or at least centrally defined topology, we'll end up with something like this, where there is a European network, or an Asian network, or an American network, but universities might want to connect to each other, not necessarily through the NREN. NRENs might want to connect to each other. There will be open light path exchanges in various places, just like there are internet exchanges. And everybody can connect wherever he thinks is useful. And there will still be a need for a backbone at the European level, which may consist of facilities from the NRENs or facilities that are centrally purchased, as we currently have in the GEON projects. But there will be all kinds of alternatives, which means you get competition, you don't have a monopoly, but you still have all the services that you need. Of course, this model only works if the funding model also corresponds, because if you have everything funded from the top down to one single instance, then you'll end up with one monopoly. If you have funding available for the NRENs, especially the ones in countries where the universities aren't that rich, if they can then pay for the backbones where they need them as they need them, if they can find the best solution for each of them individually, then you can get such a model where everybody is forced to perform at his best. And that concludes my talk, but I'm sure there will be questions.
need a microphone.
Thank you, Paul. I'm sure there will be questions. Could you put up the last slide again, maybe?
Sure.
I think that's probably where the questions will evolve around.
Quite possibly.
Yes, Nils? Yes, you need this.
Thank you very much for a nice talk about the land of free enterprise, where the best man will win, and everybody will benefit from that. I'm from Dante. I'm running the shared network. I'm running one of the top levels up there. So please allow me a little detour to another sector, a land where we have a land of free enterprise, also where the best man will survive, and that is the bank sector. Here we have a free open market where the biggest and the best were allowed to win. And if we look around Europe today, well, you got to ask yourself that question: is that a good picture? So I'm not done yet. So the question I want to discuss is specifically in this forum: how do we want to solve to have research and education networks spread evenly across Europe, and that is also to Cyprus. That is also to Malta. That is also to the less developed countries in the east. In this model, I think we have an example in the bank sector where this is not a good model.
Well, thank you. I think there's a bit of difference with the banking model. But first of all, the banking model tends to lead to too large institutions. I think that's the biggest problem. If they had been small enough that they could be allowed to fail, it would be a lot easier. So I think that reinforces the idea that, well, yes, free enterprise is a risk, agreed, but it also reinforces the fact that you don't want the largest monopoly. In fact, you want smaller entities if at all possible. And that doesn't work in every industry, that's certainly true. Coming back to the second half of your question, I think, and that was my point here, if you were to give the money in some way or another to Cyprus, to Malta, that they need to be able to connect, then they could decide whether hooking up to the GEON network or hooking up to the neighboring country or doing something different with that money was the right approach. And then you can make sure that you are the best for that job in that specific case, or somebody else could. And it would put everybody on his toes, and they would still have the funding in order to get it done. But it needs different instruments than what we have today. And structural funds could be part of the answer, but I know that they don't always solve the problem.
Small countries fail big also. Remember that, because they were given a free ride in a very dangerous world. The first to discover that very days.
Where they're given a free ride. Well, in fact, I think you were just suggesting that they should be given more or less a free ride.
They thought they were given.
They thought they were given a free ride, yes.
Okay, next question is from Stephen.
But I think this touches on the key point that's facing e-IRG at the moment. Okay, so at one level there is a need to get more innovation, more flexibility into the system. Okay, but you also then have the constraint of your primary market being the public sector, where there is a great need to ensure that there is no digital divide across Europe, that there is integration of all communities, all research communities and what they do. So I think you're then left with a very interesting model as to how do you develop an open ecosystem where parties can come in and out, yet you have enough structure so that you're able to fulfill your primary mission of making sure that your public sector customers are satisfied. So what's curious to me is what role of sort of a local regulator do you effectively see? I mean, we've seen where the banking system with no regulation has perhaps gone too far. So the question, what role is there for an organisation to, in a sense, govern the ecosystem that they operate within a particular sector? I don't even have any thoughts or experience from that perspective.
Well, I think the answer would be as little as possible. but it will be different by sector how much that is. We've seen from the experience with the internet that it is possible without any top-down regulation and a limited amount of centrally coordinated, centrally agreed standards to get an ecosystem that everybody can be part of.
That's after 40 years of experimentation.
Yes.
Do we have 40 years
Probably
of
not.
infrastructure to go through it? So, okay, so then what is the mechanism of accelerating, what structuring can be brought in over, say, the next 5-10 years to accelerate the point where the internet is now, where it needs no central structure?
Actually, I think that the presence of the internet is exactly what makes sure that all these other things can happen at a much higher speed than they could ever have happened, even let alone. But yes, you need funding mechanisms to make sure that you've got demonstration projects, for example. You need funding mechanisms to get innovation, local innovation projects going, small initiatives, and yes, conflicting initiatives even. But you need mechanisms to experiment, to try things. And if you want to accelerate the pace of innovation in grid computing in any area really, I think that is the basis. Make sure that there is enough funding available for experiments and that it's distributed at a level where it can be effective, rather than through some central organization.
Okay, Lyle?
Just a short question. Thank you very much. I did like your presentation. The approach itself was very interesting, also with some conclusions of yours. I did not completely agree. I was unhappy when you did stop at this very point, when the most interesting question would or could have followed about the money, about the costs, about the resources, financial resources, about the business case, about the business model, because everything is depending finally on that. Imagine at the very moment when the system is much simpler than this one. This is something like was shown on the previous slide. Funders are in a difficult position. They are hardly prepared to decide where to put funding, where to either through the users or through the operators, through the service providers, where to put support. If you are turning to such a more complicated system without a well-established business model, nothing is working. So that's there is an urgent need of going towards a well-established business model, and that's why I was glad with the yesterday e-fiscal presentation. That's a very first but an important step ahead. Thank you.
Yes, well, if we have another hour, we can discuss the financing part of it all. But to be honest, I think this model could work out cheaper than the previous one, in total. The question is distribution. How do you get the right funding in the right place to provide the right incentives? And that is a complicated one, and yes, structural funds were a part of it in order to address the digital divide, and I think we need other mechanisms for that as well. What would help is that we have less overlap in the physical topology. So some of these links may be hopping onto links that are already there, which means that to get this model going, all you need is that open exchange in the middle, but you don't actually need physical resources that aren't already there. But that's only a small part of the answer, and I think we don't have time for the rest of it.
I would like to come back to Niels's reply. He said, well, we have to deliver the same services everywhere, including Malta, Cyprus, and whatsoever. That's a nice ideal. Of course, it would be excellent if you could deliver all the services we need at all places at the same time. I'm pretty sure that is not possible. And then you have to decide. Are you going for the lowest common denominator because you would not like to favor anybody else? So the lowest one is defining what you can do everywhere. Unfortunately, I think this is what Europe has been doing for several years. And if you see what the US have been done with the stimulus money, I don't think we can wait until everybody could go at the same speed as the US at this moment. So for that reason alone, we have to move to a more flexible structure, I think. And the other reason is that we have an awful lot of cross-border connections which are very economically justifiable. They will never disappear. And it is logical to use them to build a cheaper infrastructure for everybody, so that will help to speed up the innovation and the capacity, etc. So I honestly don't understand why Niels is just saying, I have to deliver this to everybody at the same time, and please wait until I'm ready to do so.
Thank you. Yes, so I have two more comments, and then I'll let Paul get the final words. So first from René Boek from Nordnet, and then we will get a comment from the US afterwards.
Hi, I'm René from Nordnet. A question. It's rather cheap to say that you can do this in different ways, and if you just hand structural funds to the enrons and give them money, they'll sort that out themselves. Have you really looked through that model? Because many of the enrons that we're talking about, especially during the enrons in the digital divide, would not have the capability to do this on their own. I do agree that a too centralized structure will become, how shall we say, unresponsible or unresponsive and needs to be more agile, but I do not believe that you can take this into a total decentralized model as it is right now. So I would very much like, how would you want this funding to function? Because I think it's a rather cheap way of saying if you just give the money to Malta, anybody else, it will work. I'm sorry to say it won't, because a lot of the funding that are currently in the SHARP network going to those part of the world is actually provided by other enrons. Because if you were just giving the money from the EU, they would have far less to do, and their purchasing capability would be far less than they are today. So I would very much like to hear how you would think that would work. Okay.
I'll give the final comment to Internet 2, and then I think this will be actually an excellent starting point for the discussion this afternoon. So I suggest that we continue the discussion there. Okay.
If there's one thing that the internet is good at, it's smashing hierarchies. The rise of open light path exchanges is not due to whim. It results from the inescapable fact that the hierarchical arrangement was not meeting the needs of the research community. And we see that continuing in Internet 2. We have seen the threat, if you will, of what here you call cross-border fiber, we call regional interconnect. But that is something that we have to live with, and we have to exploit, and we have to use to our advantage, because it is serving the needs of the research community. The trouble is that the research community is not one community. There are groups of researchers who are perfectly happy with the services provided by the normal level 3, layer 3 services provided by an NREN. There are other groups of researchers who don't want anything to do with that. The physicists are notable among them. They want their own private network. If you talk to astronomers, they would like to have their own private networks. One for the SKA, one for NOLA, one for each project. And this is the requirement that we will have to meet. So the way out of this, I think, is to look at the needs of the researchers and not to argue about centralized versus decentralized, or the tensions are there. The rock on which we must base everything is what the research community needs, and recognize that there are differing needs and be able to satisfy them in different ways.
Thank you.
Well, interesting comments, and I don't think I can address them all, and I don't think it's my place to address them all. Starting with Casey's comment that, well, is the objective that everybody should have the same services? Is that the objective? Should it be? Well, I think it's a fair question. It's not my place to answer it, but it is a question that needs to be explored. Similarly, if you go to such a model, does it mean that there's just not enough money to go to Malta and Cyprus, even if you were to give the EU funds to them? Actually, I think there would be, but it does take a few changes. And it takes changes because that European backbone network will still be needed, because there will be countries who won't be able to do it on their own, and there will be a lot of money needed to get to those countries. And we need to find a way where enough cost can be taken out of the system because of more effective mechanisms, that enough is left over for the more difficult connections that still need to be made. And finally, Steve's comment, well, I think I can only agree with them, so that makes it easy. Listen to the researchers, don't worry about what structure fits best, just make sure that we deliver what they want, and that implies, I think, that there will be multiple parallel mechanisms, and we'll see what works.
Thank you again, Paul. So thanks for waking us all up this morning. Our next speaker will be Ognian Pinyat. He's from GRNet. He will speak about the regional development, some examples, a case study for Southeast Europe. Okay.
Thank you. Something went wrong here. I closed my presentation and went to standby.
Okay.
Somebody from IT, please.
Did it turn off or? So thank you, René, for inviting me here. I mean, I think it's very relevant for Southeast European initiatives to be presented here in the Nordics because our concepts quite a lot started from the Nordic concept. So thank you for inviting me here. And just talking about the open market and the competition and giving a chance to underdogs. In '92, European Championship, Yugoslavia was falling apart. So this is part of Southeast Europe. So Yugoslavia was falling apart. There was war. And then Denmark got in the championship through a wild card, replacing Yugoslavia, and they went on to win the championship. So well done, Denmark. If it wasn't for Yugoslavia and the weaker countries falling apart, you wouldn't have had your own European title. Also that now. Yeah. Sorry. This one? Yeah. First one. Okay. Okay, so I'm talking about the regional development in the European context, and I'm giving the case study of Southeast Europe. So this is the pan-European e-infrastructure vision, just to show the layered architecture there, so that I can map afterwards the Southeast European one. So at the bottom we have the networking infrastructure, the NRNs interconnected, providing the connectivity. The middle layer we have the distributed computing infrastructure, be it grid, or high-performance computing infrastructure, and then on top of that, the users from different communities can collaborate in different e-science collaborations. So in Southeast Europe, what we're working towards is a similar layered infrastructure, where at the bottom, so now I will just say a couple of names of a couple of projects and initiatives, but I'll get into more detail in a while. At the bottom we have the connectivity provided by Géant and C-Lite, and then we have two parallel computing infrastructures, one for high throughput computing, C-Grid, which is now part of e-IRG, and high performance computing infrastructure, HPC. And then on top of that we're building different collaborations on the regional level in Southeast Europe, depending on what kind of computing infrastructure people might need, so more high throughput or more high performance parallel executions on the HPC. So this kind of layered infrastructure, which is matching very closely the pan-European one, is provided by collaboration of different partners. So who are our partners in Southeast Europe setting up this kind of infrastructure? So we have provider or manager partners, the NRNs providing the interconnectivity, and national grid initiatives, NGIs, which are consortia of computing providers in the country, and in our case, it very much includes the high-performance computing providers also. And then we have the affiliated stakeholder partners, of course, research institutes, universities, the stakeholders, and recently we're also very much starting to involve the managers, policymakers, so people from the ministries, agencies, and research councils. So this territory covers the Western Balkans, so this is ex-Yugoslavia, including Albania and excluding Slovenia. Croatia is a partner in some of the projects and some it's not, depending on the type of project. Then we have Greece, Turkey, Bulgaria, Romania, Moldova, and Southern Caucasus. So this is Armenia, Georgia, and Azerbaijan. So it's quite a big community of 15 countries working together for the last 8 years or so in different types of infrastructure work. So these are the projects. By technology, grouped by technology, so we had the first series of CRN 1 and 2 projects. These have been setting up regional inter-NRN connectivity and giant links, and actually Jorge, who is sitting in the first row here, has been the project manager of first CRN, I think. BSI project has provided the link to the giant link to southern Caucasus, and C-Light project is currently setting up the dark fiber backbone in the Southeast European region. The aim of this project is really to work towards sustainable national and regional networks now also, and most countries are in GANT anyway already. Then we had 3 series of SIGRID projects, where Nikos, sitting in the first row here, was the project manager at the beginning of SIGRID 1. These projects have been setting up, so three projects, setting up regional grid infrastructure, building national grid initiatives and user communities, and then bringing these communities together in the use of the infrastructure. The result of this series of projects was building sustainable national grids, having a layer of regional coordination, and bringing all countries to join the European Grid Initiative. Currently, we're running a project dealing with high-performance computing. So this is linking the big HPC centers in Southeast Europe, relatively big ones, and providing the second-generation link to the Caucasus countries. And we expect to similarly integrate our HPC initiatives into the pan-European HPC model, but of course keeping the regional flavor. And just recently finished was quite a long project which was involving the policymakers in Southeast Europe, which were collaborating together in order to help us set up the policy agenda and also get them to work together, the funding councils in Southeast Europe, towards the long-term vision and strategy and so on. So this is just a snapshot of these projects dealing with different technologies, and this shows this in timeline with the funding. So the red part shows quite a high level of commissioned funds, so between 80 and 100% of EC funds. So this was the case in the beginning for the networking for the grid projects, and then moving on to this orange area, which shows at least 50% matching funds from the countries. Yeah. So this is quite a big achievement for us, because it has been a lot of lobbying there to secure the national level support funds. So working towards some kind of complementarity in funding. And then moving on to totally green area, which is zero commission funding, which Commission always likes to hear. So here's the zero commission funding for C-Light, which is the regional dark fiber backbone. But the message here is that we're moving on from mainly EC funds towards a mix of national funds and regional funds also. So now just technology one by one, just to give an idea of how this works. So for the network, currently we're, as I said, CRN has set up the regional NRN interconnectivity and the links to GANT. And currently C-Light is the project which we're running currently, which is the deployment of advanced regional network infrastructure. This includes fibers and equipment in the area of Southeast Europe. So this is under the Hellenic Plan for Reconstruction of the Balkans. 80% funds come from the Greek state, which, no matter how paradoxically this might sound, and 20% of the funds come from the beneficiary countries' governments. So this is 100% funded by the region itself. Serbia is currently at implementation stage. This is a 6.5 million euro tender. I think Slavko is the deputy head of the head now of computing center in Serbia. So 6.5 million, I think it is the tender, Slavko. Yeah, something like that. Yeah. In Bulgaria, it's at the tender stage also. Romania has set up from its own funds, from structural funds, and former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia were ongoing with that. And we're also looking into, I mean, the other countries also can benefit, and we're trying to lobby a lot with the governments in Montenegro and Albania to try to get them involved, but it's not being easy. So currently 3 countries plus 1 ongoing. And we're looking into setting up a management body for the C-Line network, which we call CNET, and we did different studies, kind of analysis, what kind of operational centers this might involve. The distributed option is the most logical. So what are the regional benefits of such a collaboration? Yeah? So exploit economy of scale, so for connectivity, definitely for giant links, having a dark fiber cloud there behind the Jehan Pop certainly would, having one connectivity line would certainly reduce the costs. And of course, the cost of common operations, that would be a good thing too. The next point is that the common development path for ICT, this kind of network provides this thing. And of course, providing a joint platform for advanced services, including computing. The good thing is that through the policy initiatives, collaborations we had with ministries and funding bodies, we managed to provide, to gain at least pro forma support, policy level support for cross-border links as well. Moving on to grid initiatives. So this is just a snapshot of grid sites at the end of the SIGRID series, which was a couple of years ago. So we have a number of grid sites in different countries, a large number of dedicated CPUs just for regional scientific collaborations in different scientific fields, meteorology, seismology, environmental protection, and so on. So this is just a snapshot just to show geographically where the grid sites are located in this map. And the outcome of these three projects, so they're about 6 years in time frame. We have built the regional infrastructure and the regional operations through these three projects. We have secured the buy-in of user communities, so we have a really large number of user communities running on this daily. National structuring was carried out through national grid initiatives. All countries have at the end joined European Grid Initiative. And the key to success again here was distributing operations, so having a common responsibility for operations and specifically supporting the cross-border communities in joint experiments over the grid infrastructure. And also very important was the policy side of things, to build joint lobbying strategies for all the countries. So the regional benefits of having this kind of grid collaboration in these 6 years of development were to exchange know-how through regional operations and user support, to exchange know-how in terms of national level organizational models, meaning national grid initiatives primarily, having a common development path for computing, and building up these strong regional user communities. We have very explicit policy support, which has been renewed again formally in a memorandum of understanding for regional resource sharing, which is supported by the governmental agencies in the region of Southeast Europe. Another very strong policy kind of development here is that the governments will lobby to set up national level grid projects and different national level grid initiative related things. So this is quite important. And of course, the joint lobbying strategies to get this high percentage of national level contributions for EGI is important. And now moving on to high performance computing. This is the currently running initiative. We have the infrastructure which is shown on the map here, 2 Blue Gene machines and another couple of smaller installations, 120 teraflops in aggregate computing power. We have larger procurements coming up in Greece and Serbia, hopefully, depending now on the economical situations, but I think that things will go ahead in Greece, definitely. We have 26 applications in 3 different virtual research communities running over the infrastructure right now, and we envisage this in a wider European context as a bridge to praise, because the local scientists, we don't see them really needing directly tier 0 resources, and it's a good idea for them to run on tier 1 resources until the applications scale up to tier 0 and praise levels. We have been studying the possibility of joint operations center for such a HPC, let's say distributed tier 1 infrastructure, and we have different results in terms of what is the manpower required, and what is the model. Again, the distributed model of operations is what we see as the most logical. And the important thing here is that we have a balance of national and EC funds in this particular project. So just some of the application examples. These were the highlight of the previous period, the numerical study of ultra cold quantum gases, quantum mechanical molecular mechanics, molecular dynamics in computational chemistry, searching for novel mRNA genes and their targets, and so on. Again, what are the regional benefits of this kind of HPC collaboration? It's the know-how exchange to regional operations, again. and especially and very, very importantly, the know-how exchange in terms of procurement of new centers. Then know-how exchange in terms of national level organizational models. We have a continuing development path in computing. We have very strong regional user communities. And as I said before, building a platform for entry level to brace, something which we see specifically as one of the most important things. We have very clear policy support for regional resource sharing by governmental agencies. So they have very clearly said that the upcoming procurements and the new tier 1 centers that they are funding will be open up to regional research, which is very important. And a concrete support is now shown by the actual infrastructure partners by sharing their resources in a common pilot call for applications independent of the project completely. So the infrastructure is open to different user communities of the region through a common call. And finally, again, we are working a lot on the policy level in pushing the governments to stimulate national level projects in high performance computing too. And now moving on, so this wraps up the technology, let's say, benefits of technological collaboration, just a little bit about the policy level collaboration. So the project, which lasted for 3 years, called Sierra EI, has been just finished, and the idea was that there we had, apart from the NRNs or NGIs, we had also the ministries, research councils, and the idea was to develop and strengthen the coordination and cooperation of national programs and build up some kind of regional vision on the policy level for e-infrastructures. So the type of collaboration, moving on from quite soft collaboration in terms of having a communication platform similar to, let's say, e-infrastructure reflection group here. Online communication platform was in place. We had regular meetings between the policymakers in Southeast Europe. We carried out the in-depth analysis of programs and funding modalities and research infrastructures. National program best practices identification has been carried out. So we have a set of best practices for governments when they run e-infrastructure programs, how to, just like a guidelines, how to set them up. National program cookbook, which is exactly that. Then we had joint training events in these best practices. We had bilateral meetings, large number of dissemination events, and so on. So this is like soft type of actions we have carried out between the policymakers and the governments in Southeast Europe. A little bit more concretely, the long-time memorandum of understanding were signed in grid and high-performance computing and networking, specifically about resource sharing. So this is very important that the governments are committed to that for the infrastructures that they fund, very explicitly. We have also signed a long-term MOU between the ministries, setting up the regional vision and strategy until 2020. We have carried out detailed studies for joint operation centers for network and high-performance computing. So we have, including organizational models, so we have some kind of idea that if it materializes the C-Light network as a real regional cloud, how this could be managed in longer term, also for high-performance computing, some estimates. And finally, the joint pilot call between the ministries. We managed to get the ministries to put together a small sum to fund a regional call in cloud computing. And this is the call. So the call is very small. It's just 700,000 euros. I still think that this is quite a success, taking into account the crisis. The idea was just to put together, because there's no running cloud project in Southeast Europe, so just to put together the community, get people together to work on state-of-the-art studies or infrastructure trials or some applications, or to leverage a bit the e-government ideas for cloud and e-science. So this is the virtual common pot. And the call, well, there's a number of documents which support this call, so there's been a lot of work involved in setting up the infrastructure for that. As I said, unfortunately not a very large amount of money at all, but it is a proof of principle work. So this is about to be launched, or actually has been launched last month. And then the ministerial level strategy MOU, which, as I just mentioned, sets up different targets for Southeast Europe in 2020. The idea is, I'm not going to read through it in detail, but having the cross-border fiber links and having the regional backbone there in place, having the full open resource sharing on the grid and high-performance computing levels, and so on and so forth. So this kind of regional vision is defined within this memorandum of understanding signed by 10 ministries in the region of Southeast Europe. So, sorry. So just want to highlight the contribution of, oops, what's happening here? Some strange, okay, let me do this. Sorry. Technical support. Thank you. Thank you. No, I don't know what's
Off again?
No, look, here I'm seeing that incoherence.
So it doesn't change that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Escape. Control Alt Delete. Control Alt Delete. Panic.
Don't get panic.
No. Don't stress.
So this one,
Yeah, I just want to go to
Faucet.
20. I don't know what it. Yes. So
Continue the dash.
you want to exit the slideshow.
Continue.
No, I just want this now.
Down.
Maybe control delete was not such a bad idea.
Yeah, maybe control. Yeah.
Should be. Actually.
Control. Was it Control Alt Delete?
At least you can use your whiteboard.
Ah, yes.
Do you have it?
Yeah, good.
This one?
Thank you, guys. So then René was asking me in the presentation just to underline the contribution to setting national regional agendas also. So, we're moving then throughout these 8 years from having technology projects, so pushing for national contributions to GEANT, e-IRG, and PRAISE. We did quite a lot of work regarding that. Stimulating the governments to support national level projects. Producing national policy best practices, program guidelines, organizational aspects of NRN and NGIs. So more from the national level, we're moving towards regional level, where we're setting up memoranda on regional cooperation and sharing, cross-border fibers, and so on, and one-off hopefully more long-term regional funds also. Yeah, so these are the kind of things we put on the agendas of the ministries or get the ministries to collaborate in. So just to wrap up, this is quite a concrete example of regional collaboration, best practice, starting from the technology levels, different technology levels, and going to the policy level. This regional technical cooperation that we've been running brought forward significant results in a stable and sustainable infrastructures on different levels. And the further policymakers' collaboration leverages these with more long-term actions, long-term sustainable support for infrastructures in all countries, as well as regional collaboration, investments and programs. So this regional layer has been an added value and has been a development opportunity. And the important thing is that we're still trying to keep a nice balance and the synergy and the complementarity between the national, regional and European funds too, because this was another thing that was mentioned. So this wraps up the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm sure there are questions. René.
So, thank you for giving this presentation. It underlined what I was looking for, namely that trying to crystallize some strategic points from this, you having worked so successfully on the regional level, do you think that the way that European architecture of infrastructure is set up, namely being a country connects to some kind of monopoly organization, whether it be GEANT, PRAISE, e-IRG or EU-DAT, do you think there has been sufficient room politically and economically for you to do these things? So obviously the Commission has supported you a lot in these programs and on the regional level. But do you think that the way that the European model is organized with these big projects like PRAISE and GEANT, that really you have been given support to do this? Have you been encouraged and helped, or has it been like a third player in the bed, so to say?
Well, at the beginning we were very much a third player indeed, but I think that throughout this regional cooperation, because we have a very strong technical regional cooperation, and because there were small new teams, they were very very motivated, so there was a lot of innovation going on. So I think that we reached certain credibility technically also, and this was probably the best way to reach out to the monopolies. But indeed, in our opinion, it is cumbersome. It is quite centralized, monolithic structures are difficult to deal with. And we do it in a constructive way, but indeed there should be more open. An example would be a praise now, where you have very centralized, top centric tier zeros and so on, and we find it very beneficial right now, for example, to have a tier one and doing concrete things on our tier one, scaling up the applications, and then maybe going to praise and running there. But what? Yes, definitely. The answer is that it has been difficult, but through technical collaboration and technical inputs to bigger projects, we have managed to fight our way through.
Yeah. More questions? Yes.
Thanks, Auján, for this presentation, which is very important in the sense that if we are thinking and talking about ERA, the European Research Area, we are thinking also about those parts of the ERA which are not in the most developed regions of Europe, because we all should know, and it is taken duly into consideration, that brain and talent density is the same all over the world. So there are no real differences as far as this aspect is concerned. There are differences at the moment which are somehow expressed by the digital divide, even in the area of research infrastructures. On the other hand, sometimes we are hearing politicians talking about double or triple speed Europe rather than a single speed Europe. I think that in the area of research and development, a single speed Europe is an absolute necessity, because we need in Europe a critical mass, and all the regions are to be involved in that critical mass. And these efforts you are talking about are helping the European community to build this critical mass within the European research area. And we others in the other regions should be, and probably and surely we are prepared to be partners to that. Thank you.
Thank you for that, the constructive comment. Indeed, this is the case, and I do not support this multi-tiered, multi-speed Europe as well. I mean, when you compare praise funds to HPC funds, I mean, HPC project is like 1.5 million euros. It's really nothing compared to praise. So the speeds are different there. But as I said, you get a little bit of seed funding for a regional initiative. This is 10 countries, 15 countries in some cases, and then through technical achievements, you can show, where you really belong, which is in the first speed. Yugoslavia should have won the '92 championship instead of Denmark. Yes.
Okay, I think we have to stop you there before I think we go too much into football. So thanks again, Auján. Our next speaker is Marilyn Lengert from the European Space Agency, and she'll talk about the scientific cloud computing infrastructure for Europe. It will be a nice place. Welcome. Which one?
So it must be this one. So I'm going to go forward with this one.
Yes. Is it on?
It seems, I don't know.
Yes.
This one. Okay, thank you. So good morning, everybody. Thank you for the invitation. I'm going to talk about an initiative that started about 1.5 years ago that is now called Helix Nebula, the Science Cloud. So, end of 2010, ESA, European Space Agency, started collecting requirement for cloud computing for space activity. We realized that cloud computing was a very interesting approach for us. We have a lot of data to distribute to a big community, and this was something that was very much interesting. But on the other side, we have industrial policy that say that the money we spend should be spent in the country that are the member states of the European Space Agency, which is basically Europe. And looking at the commercial offering, we realized that the commercial offering was mainly, not to say exclusively, North American, and this did not really fit with what we wanted to do. So we said, okay, maybe we should look if something is existing in Europe. And we realized that it was so much scattered over small, well, even this big company for Europe, it was still small offering on the market. So we start to have some concern and say, okay, maybe we should see if other organizations have the same need than we have, and see if we can stimulate the commercial and service providers in building something for us. So when we presented this initiative in January 2011, the CERN and EMBL joined. It was presented at the Aeroforum working group. So then we started to collect the requirement on both sides for science, but also for industry. What would they be interested in this partnership? And then we drafted a strategic plan that was endorsed in June 2011 at the ESRIN workshop, where we had suppliers of, even competitors of IT services or infrastructure. We had science organizations, we had EC projects, and we had also some EC from DG Inso, DG EC stuff. So then we decided to go for this strategic plan, and we said, okay, to validate the strategic plan, we need a couple of pilots. So industry asked us, the user organization, to prepare some pilots during the summer and to present them in September, October at a workshop in Heidelberg at EMBL. So we prepared this requirement for 3 pilots. They were discussed, a very interesting discussion, where you had industry competitors together in the same room, still thinking, how could we do this? This was very challenging for them to respond to the needs of science. So it was very nice atmosphere there, very, I would say, innovative. And then we started the time to get agreement on a lot of things, including an NDA that everybody had to sign. We started the pilot in January with a proof of concept, and we had a governance in place. I will talk about it. And then all the members signed the NDA, 18 members that were the active members at this time, plus 5 that have joined later on. So the strategic plan, it's on the web. You can look at it. It's a 20-page document, but I think it's clearly identify what we want to do, which is establish a sustainable multi-tenant cloud computing infrastructure in Europe, initially based on the needs of the European research area and space agencies, based on commercial services for multiple IT industry providers, adhere to internationally recognized policies and quality standards, and a governance structure that involves all the stakeholders. So the strategic plan outlined 4 goals. The first one is to set up this cloud computing infrastructure for the era. The second is to identify and adopt policies for trust, security, and privacy at European level. Third is to create a lightweight governance structure involving all stakeholders, and the 4th goal is to define a short and medium-term funding scheme. The idea behind is to say, okay, there is all type of science around that produce all kind of data on whatever science you look. It's about the same. What do? We collect data that are coming from instruments, that are coming from whatever. We process the data, we analyze the data, and we distribute the result of the data. So that you look for EMBL, what they are doing, what you look for CERN, what they are doing, what ESA is doing, at the end it all comes back to data processing, archiving, and distributing. So we said, okay, there is all this kind of science. They have all type of data, in situ, space, simulation, process, and you name it. And what we would like to do, if they are put all on the same platform, you have the ability, through a layer that would be type of apps or tools that you find on this platform today, to have the ability to make cross-domain research on cross-domain evaluation, so that you cannot look at science in a vertical way, but in an horizontal way, where you can tackle the major challenges that we have, like climate change, disease, geohazard, and these kind of things. That needs not only one type of science data, but several types of science data. So this initiative is addressing some action of the digital agenda for Europe. It supports the single digital market, it enhances interoperability and standards, it stimulates research and innovation, it improves trust and security. This it will try to. So we are followed by the digital agenda. It's a collaboration initiative. This is, as we said, it's a public-private partnership that involves European project and the European Commission's, user organization, which we call the demand side, and commercial service provider, which we call the supply side. And everybody is actively participating, putting energy and also money into the pot to ensure that this is going to happen. So far, the governance model is pretty simple. There is a user board that includes all the people from these three organizations, plus ESA is not alone. We are working with CNES, TLR, and CNR, which is an Italian national research center. So it includes all the people in this user side. There is another board, which is a service provider board, which is all the industry that are participating and have signed the NDA. They have a subgroup, which is the technical architecture group, that is looking more into the general architecture for the overall initiative. And then the management team, which is made half-half, so it's 3 people from the user organization, 3 people from the service provider board. The membership, the consortium membership so far is for free. You have different status members. You have members that are active members, and you have some that are requested to be just adopter status, that they just follow what we are doing, and they may be able to adopt whenever we have some result to be adopted. Everybody has signed a non-disclosure agreement, and we are starting to open to interested parties. So right now this consortium is closed because we would like, before we open it to others, to have finished the proof of concept and to have agreed on architecture, global architecture, before we bring some new suppliers on board, so that we know where we want to go. They will have to kind of pass over a script test, so that we are sure that whatever they come, what kind of infrastructure they come to bring, is able to fulfill our requirements. So we are going to open it. We had planned to open it this summer, but we have not finished the proof of concept. We will be able only to deliver some intermediate result in this summer, so it will be more towards the end of the year. So timeline, so setup was in 2011. The pilot phase is 2 years, 2012 until the end of 2013. The proof of concept, which I said, is a little bit delayed. It took more time than we expected. We planned 3 weeks per supplier to provide a working infrastructure, and it happened that it was much more work on supplier side, but also on user side. So we're a little bit late. What we want to do during the proof of concept is this multi-tenant infrastructure, which is several providers come one after the other plug the system, and we see if it's work. And it has to work without us changing our infrastructure, changing our requests. And then, of course, after 2014, if everything has worked as planned, we will open it as a full-scale service market, where there will be more services, application users, and service providers. So the pilot phase, the flagship use case. So what do we want to do during these 2 years of pilot? We want to explore and eventually push a series of perceived barriers to cloud computing adoption. Those are security, reliability, data privacy, scalability, elasticity, network performance, integration, vendor lock-in, legal concerns, and transparency. So we are going to work on all of these aspects to ensure that whatever solution is available after these 2 years, we have some kind of response to these. So the selection of the flagship use case has been made in such a way that they address scientific challenges with societal impact. We wanted them high-profile applications that catch the public imagination and encourage others to use the service. We showed need of significant scale of resources, federation, aggregation of data set, long-term archiving, and on-demand processing. on bring people and data together, building communities and stimulating innovation. As I said yesterday, we use the cloud for what it's good for, and it may not be good for everything. So these flagships, there is the Atlas e-IRG physics cloud use in CERN to support the computing capacity needs for the Atlas experiment. There is a genomic assembly in the cloud for EMBL, a new service to simplify large-scale genome analysis for a deeper insight into evolution on biodiversity. On the supersite exploitation platform in ESA, CNES, TLR, and CNR, to create an Earth observation platform focusing on earthquake and volcanoes research. So I'm not going to go into the detail of this flagship, but just what we expect from this flagship. So the flagship in CERN is a real-time processing of Atlas experiment with the goal to evaluate cloud technology for Atlas use cases, to design model to integrate cloud resources within Atlas distributed computing, and the implementation in Atlas software framework. For the EMBL, so it's the genomic assembly in the cloud, this is now affordable because it's nearly costs nothing to have your genome taken, your NDA done, but then the problem is to make all the sequencing of it, and it produces a vast amount of data which need to be analyzed. So the objective is to provide the genomic assembly and annotation service to a broad range of researchers in various communities, and to remove the computational infrastructure hurdles that may prevent genomic assembly project taking place. Finally, the supersite exploitation platform, the idea is to bring space and in situ data on a very large cloud infrastructure, bringing together all the communities. This is an example. This was the Japan earthquake. And on the supersite, scientists have been able to post as many data relevant to the places that has helped to understand what has happened, on how the things have moved, how the stress has moved from the north to the south. But there's still a lot of things that are unknown. And to be able to understand better, we will need some more data like INSAR, GPS, seismic, petrology, geochemistry, which are different areas of science that we are not taking care of. But if the scientists that are working on this subject would post their data on this platform, then we will be able all together to understand better what is happening and how we can not predict, but at least evaluate where the risks are and how they are. So the expected result of the SEP is on the science side is to get a better scientific understanding of geohazard with the aim of providing sound information about the risks and the potential mitigation measures. In terms of data sharing, it's information extracted from different sources, satellite and in situ, to open a wide range of new approaches on cross-domain research. And finally, and very important, is building community. In return to accessing the SEP, we expect the scientists either to provide results into the information repository of the Science Cloud, to provide their data processing open source code, and to provide also some application and tools. So this is the coverage of the flagships. So in terms of scientific goals, scientific society impact, and photogenic, the three of them are. And then, okay, you can read what are the main coverage of this. But altogether, they cover all the points we have addressed in the strategic plan. So current status, the proof of concept started in January. The committees are in place. The governance is in place. They are active. The NDA has been signed. Each flagship is being deployed with a series of providers independently. We expect to have initial result by, well, we will have intermediate result in June, July, and then we will have the final result in autumn, let's say, and then we will be able to open to new entrants. So these are the companies that are actively participating to the proof of concept. So what next? So as soon as we have concluded this proof of concept, we will be able to open to new suppliers or new users. So newcomers can either submit flagship that propose some innovation in terms of functionality, performance, scope, business opportunity, or impact on the European cloud computing infrastructure, or just use the Helix Nebula platform as is. The flagship use case must be sponsored by user organization and service provider. This means that it's a partnership. Everybody has to work on to be able and to be ready to make the effort to do whatever is needed to have this flagship working. So they will be selected so as to be complementary and maximize coverage of the objective outlined in the strategic plan. And we will provide templates for this. So what is the relevance to this e-IRG session today? Well, reading the e-IRG white paper 2011, I think this initiative is pretty much in line in several things that I've read in the document, which is to develop an offering of e-infrastructure service leading to their sustainability, to introduce governance model based on PPP, to increase collaboration within the research area. EGI is a member of the consortium. We are working with S3, discussing with Géant, Terena, Praise. The federated identity management is going to be addressed within Helix Nebula. The e-infrastructure service promoting standard will boost will boost innovation on a large commercial market. And Helix Nebula has the potential to become the major European data infrastructure, allowing all scientific users to work cross-domain in order to tackle major societal challenges. So what could be the possible collaboration? It could be that we could propose input for the e-IRG white paper on any policy aspect which we think will help Helix Nebula to reach sustainability as an infrastructure. An example is to have the ability to have hybrid clouds that will allow us to integrate publicly funded infrastructure, such as our own data center, as well as Géant, EGA, and Praise, within Helix Nebula. On the other side, e-IRG could help us in defining an appropriate governance model for Helix Nebula, as if we send you some questionnaire or make some interviews, because you have a great knowledge about these kind of things, and it could be very helpful if we could have your feedback on this. So basically, this summarizes this partnership. This is the root is the strategic plan. These are all the people all the companies that have signed the NDA and that are willing to work on this Helix Nebula. These are the three pilot projects that have started, and the idea is, after the proof of concept, to extend this and to extend this. So more pilots and more providers. And if you're interested, you can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Thank you.
Thank you very much. First question from Paulus.
Thank you. It was nice to see the collaboration between the three agencies, the CERN and the Biological Laboratory. My question is the following. I see that as far as ESA is concerned, the applications that you gave are on seismology and volcano prediction. Now, you didn't speak at all, I didn't hear you speaking at all about the experiments that ESA is carrying out, the ISS, all the calls and the projects and the programs that are going on in ESA. Is there any connection to these, or do you plan anything in the future?
Alors, for the usage of the cloud, the science directorate in ESA with the Gaia mission, which is going to make the map of the universe, is currently using Amazon as a test for the algorithm. By using Amazon, because they have pushed Amazon to the very end of their capacity, we have helped Amazon to be better, which was kind of it was good, but I mean, we would have preferred to help Europe. And so they are ready to move to Helix Nebula for the experiment as soon as we will have something that is solid enough so that they can move from Amazon to us. For the rest of the agency, we are currently having an internal study to figure out who would be interested to move to the cloud, and I think we're going to go into a kind of a hybrid solution, which is an internal cloud in the first place to get people used to the idea of the cloud, and slowly to move them back on this Helix Nebula. So some will go directly to Helix Nebula, so some will probably go first to the internal cloud and then to Helix Nebula.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Marilyn. And while appreciating the effort behind these facts you were talking about. Let me mention two concerns. One is related to the title of the presentation. The title is Helix Nebula, the science cloud, and this is a bit too much for me and for some of us, I suppose. If you would say one possible science cloud or a major, a demanding science cloud, all of them are fine, but the science cloud is too much. So this, and I'm afraid this is not just the title of the presentation, but it is expressing a habit on behalf of the Helix Nebula fans. The other concern is related to the bad feeling of mine that you, the Helix Nebula people, seem to negligate what the research, networking and e-infrastructure community has built in the last 10, 15, 20 years, I don't know, because the composition of the consortium is providing a message about your idea of going a different way. And even if you did mention collaboration with Terena and Jean, I'm afraid this collaboration is just in a starting phase, if at all. So I would like to ask you if there is any progress with this collaboration and with the collaboration with the traditional e-infrastructure in Europe. Thank you.
Okay, I'll to answer to the first question on the name. We wanted to call it only Helix Nebula, but it was already taken. So we had to make it longer, but we didn't want to make it too long because the first title was a strategic plan for European computing infrastructure in Europe. So it was much too long, so we cut it. But only you have to have some ambition, okay? We have to ambition to be the one. And then we can look forward and say, okay, this is our goal. But it doesn't mean, I mean, it has to be very clear. We don't expect to replace what is existing. We just want to fill up a gap, on a gap that exists at European level in terms of commercial cloud service that is not vendor locking. And this is the gap. But by doing this, we can, and we are trying to, and we are, I mean the discussion we had on Niels is there to say, are very constructive with all the other players to say, what we want is, whenever you have some interest in joining, because it has to be a win-win as any partnership, then join. This is the discussion we have also with e-IRG. I mean, it may be interesting for them also to sell some of the capacity when they are not used, and to move them. On the commercial will be more than happy to use this because they don't have the infrastructure ready now. So everybody who wants to join or has something to propose is welcome, and it's absolutely not closed. When we opened this, I mean, when I sent the invitation for the workshop in Estrin, I sent to 20 industry in Europe that I knew had some offering in cloud computing. 11 replied and came, and it happened that at this workshop, the strategic plan was approved, and everybody said, yes, we want to go, but now we want to go, the group here in this room, because we are going to put a lot of energy and a lot of money inside. And those who were not there, I'm sorry, they missed the train. And I really made a lot of effort to bring as many people as possible, but I was myself surprised of the success. I did not expect that this workshop will be a start of a very strong collaboration. So, but I mean, it's really open, and the idea is really to bring all the resources available, willing to join into the system. If we want to compete, I mean, these guys, you put them all together. They are not even 1/10 of Amazon, not even 1/10. And these are big players. You have, I mean, Atos, Logica, T-System. I mean, these are big players. We are very much lagging behind. And the only way to make it is to put all the forces together, public and private.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Promising.
CERN has built up its WLCG grid over the last 10 years with considerable effort. Now, is the idea to replace this, or is just to add capacity?
Absolutely, to add capacity.
Why? If it's a success, then why would you not want to replace? And
Well,
I note that you have the Atlas as customers in this, and also EGI is part of it. So my question is, have you made a kind of policy analysis of the consequences of success? So what does this mean in terms of organizational structure and funding model, in terms of computing for one, Atlas?
Yeah, so what we are doing currently is a business model. So a business model on both sides. There has to be a business model for companies and service providers to join, because right now it's clear that the scientific domain is not a commercial business. What they are building for us is specifically for us, and when EMBL needs a 1 terabyte machine in the cloud nobody in the room nobody outside of this room would need this kind of thing. So it's not commercial. They do it to say, if we're able to do it for CERN, ESA, and EMBL, we are able to do it for most of the others. Okay? So right now there is not a very good business case for industry to do it, except that if they really manage to build together an infrastructure, they can afterwards sell this to government onto commercial things. So we are building a business model on the side of the suppliers, but also on our side to see, is it valid to go on the cloud, at which cost? And we can compare very easily with Amazon, which can deliver the service. Except that these guys have said we want to build something better than Amazon, because if we have to build from scratch, and this is what they are doing for most of them, let's do it properly with taking into account all the requirements we have in terms of security and privacy, elasticity, and all this. So the business model is under discussion, and maybe not everything needs to go on the cloud. So the grid has still some activity that it doesn't make sense to put them on the cloud because it may be most costly. So all this has to be evaluated all the time. But the idea is not today, okay, we say, the day there is a cloud, we get rid of the grid and we move everything to the cloud. This is not the idea. It's really to work whatever is the best place to compute, or to we'll choose according to business model and relevance.
One final question?
Yeah. One. It's a pity that we didn't have the opportunity to listen to the presentation from David Simonson yesterday about identity and identity federation and trust and all that type of things. And I see that identity and policies for trust, security and privacy, as it says in your slide, is part of the strategic plan. I just wanted to point to the discussion that's taken place in our community. I mean, Terena has been working on a foresight study as part of the GEAN project, which is called Aspire, and one of those studies is actually about community clouds. By community, I mean, research and education at large, which is our remit. And one of the distinctive aspects of these clouds vis-a-vis the commercial cloud offering is really the trust component, with it, identity, how to control and manage access to those resources, etc. So I would just like to, in a way, I don't want to, we can talk offline about this, but I just wanted to point out that one which is, really an essential element, and something that our community has been really working hard and has actually managed to get significant achievements in the past few years, and I think it would be very good. I know we're late in starting, we should start talking about sort of tighter collaboration, and I think this is one topic where we could contribute, and I'd like to encourage you to follow up on that.
Okay, excellent. And but you may know that also Bob in CERN is also very active in this federated identity management. Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thanks again. And our next speaker is Bente Megård from the University of Copenhagen, and she will talk about language e-infrastructures.
Yep.
Thank you.
This one? The second? Yeah. Okay. This one? Just back. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation. I need to use this one. Yeah, thank you for the invitation. So I'm from the University of Copenhagen, Center for Language Technology, as you can see, but I'm also involved in the Clarin e-IRG, and actually, I think maybe since I was invited, I have now become the Vice Director of the Clarin e-IRG. Clarin is hosted by the Netherlands, so the main offices are in Utrecht. And then, I'm sorry, a few days ago, I was also, I'm also now have become member of the S3 Strategic Working Group for, has a strange name, Social and Cultural Innovation. So I'm looking forward to that. Yeah, it's a bit strange. So I thought I wanted to start with just a short overview of what is Clarin. You saw my title. I've been trying to focus on those challenges. I've been asked to tell you about the challenges that we have in our environment, and there are a lot of challenges, and they cover all those aspects that we talked about yesterday. There are technical aspects, there are financial aspects, there are governance and organizational aspects, and sometimes they're all mixed. But Clarin is, the acronym comes from Common Language Resources and Technology Infrastructure, and it's an e-IRG since February. We are the second e-IRG that has been established, it's nice. It's a research infrastructure for researchers in the humanities and social sciences. And the goal is to make it possible for humanities and social sciences researchers to take advantage, you could say, to take advantage of the technology. It's connected to language technology because our main material are language-based materials, and you need language technology in order to provide those services. But this is not a language technology research infrastructure. Here, language technology is simply a tool to make it possible for researchers at large in the humanities to use digital materials and to do it at a high level. So that was the goal. Then the methods is to create a European federation of digital archives that build upon or include language-based material. And this can be language-based as in written language, like text. It can also be audio, video, multimodal things, pictures and text and so on. Anything that includes language. And that's the archive thing. But then we also, and that's a very, very important part of it, we need to integrate services and tools to manipulate and explore, enhance, and exploit this data. I mean, this is really, that's what takes it further. Otherwise, you could say, well, you could just have a library. If it's just an archive, you can have a library. But this, I mean, the important thing here is that the services and tools are integrated. Then, of course, it's also one of the methods to give easy access. And easy means easy in terms of, it has to be technically easy, easy for the user to do it. It has to be possible wherever in the world or wherever, and it has to be single sign-on and this kind of thing. And of course, since we're language-based, we want to cover as many languages as possible. You can say in a way that this only becomes really interesting when we cover many, many languages. We do have many languages in Europe, and there are many more languages out there in the world, and of course we don't want to put borders just around Europe, but Europe's languages are, of course, the first focus. And then we want to collaborate now. Yeah. So those challenges that I've chosen to have a look at today are listed here. And we'll just go through them. I wanted to start with the users, because you could say this research infrastructure is nothing if we don't have users. It would just fall apart. We need users to provide their resources, to ask for tools, and to use the stuff themselves, and to teach their students, and so on. So we have a very, very widespread user base. It's we have more than 200 member sites in the preparatory project. Clarion is NERIC now, but we are building upon a preparatory phase project that we had from 2008 to 2011. And in that, during that project, we had 215 member sites in 33 countries. Now, of course, things are narrowing down since we became an ERIC. Things become more formal, and there's no longer funding from the European Commission. It's just those national funding, those nations that have been prepared to join, and this is something we need to figure out. Now, the challenges that we are facing there are the need for well-scaling and easily deployable middleware and standards, and usability. Again and again, this comes back. Usability for the non-expert user. I mean, these people are experts, but they're experts in their field, in their humanities field. They are not technical experts. That's what I mean by non-expert user. We need to reach users that do not already know that they are users or they are to be users. We need to reach out and really find those people who could take advantage of this. They are not born with this. I mean, this is different from the if you compare to the more technical fields, because the humanities users, they don't always know that there's something here that's really good for them. Well, another challenge is, of course, that with such a widespread user base all over Europe, all over, you know, there is a risk, a big risk maybe, that the wheel is reinvented again and again. So we need to reach out and to really make sure people know what exists. Connected to the users, we have the user interfaces. Well, I think I've already mentioned some of this. Users are humanities researchers, and they need to be able to search in and manipulate very, very large repositories. And they need to be able to design what they want to do. See, if you have a certain number of services, they need to be able to build their own workflow and to get to the conclusions they want to reach without having to know too much technical stuff. And I think we should not demand, for instance, that they know anything about XML and this kind of thing. We always work in XML, but I don't want them to be able to do this. I don't want them to be able to write regular expressions or this kind of thing. We should give them automatic tools for designing the workflows in the most efficient way, and we should not ask them for these technical things. I wanted to just give you a few examples of what kind of data do we have, what kind of services am I talking about, because I thought you may not imagine that. So data can be text, can be old text written in strange orthographies, maybe even with strange letters and so on. It could also be, of course, more modern text. It can be literature, and it could be language for special purposes is a term in my field. It's like specific language with terminology and so on, technical language you could say, which is another type of language and has other characteristics. We will want to have parallel text so that you can make translation studies, videos with sound and with gestures, newspapers, radio news, TV news, and so on, parliament debates, tombstones. I mean, languages everywhere. And the kind of tools and services I have on the right-hand side. You want to add annotations to this kind of thing. But an annotation is an enrichment of what's there. You may add, this word is a noun, this word is in the plural, so on. So the next researcher can already build on this. This is really a lot about sharing and enriching resources, so which will make new analysis and more searches more efficient for the at the next level. You want to search, be able to search all occurrences of the same gesture, and check if if this always comes together with specific expression, or if the same gesture can have several different meanings. Find the most common pattern of whatever. Find all the names in historical texts, and we can distinguish place names and person names and so on. This can give you easily an overview of what happened where, who were together at what places. Find all different pronunciations of a certain letter or a certain sequence of letters in Danish or in any other language, of course. Find positive or negative expressions and so on. Just to give you some examples of what it is that this is to be used for. So, of course, the repositories are a very, very important part of what we need. We have large volumes, and we will continue to get more. This will never stop. You can never say, okay, that's done. We have this research infrastructure. It will never, ever stop. There's so much language-based material in the world, and we produce it every day, and there'll be an interest in analyzing it from some researchers then. So we will really, we don't yet have very, very large volumes, but we will get there. And it's heterogeneous. We have seen some other research infrastructures that collect measurements from the space and so on. I believe this is much more heterogeneous, may not have the same sizes, but we have text and audio and visual, as I already said. And we also live in a world where either you could say there are no standards for the representation of the data and the metadata. You can also say, because there are some standards, but then okay, there's more than one. Yes, there's more than one. We do have many standards for data and for metadata. This doesn't make it more easy to search and analyze the stuff. So I've tried again. I mean, sometimes a little bit difficult to distinguish between the description and the challenges, but the challenges are users should see one single collection. This is true for each country, but in a way it's also true when you look across the whole infrastructure. And this means that we do need agreements on standards, and this is what we are working at, of course, for data and also for metadata. Just to give you a few figures, I have asked one of my technical colleagues in the Netherlands, he provided me with this. We have 700 different data categories in 17 languages for the time being, and we just started, but this is of course the result of the preparatory phase project. And so we have 425,000 metadata records in our VLO, means Virtual Language Observatory, at present, and this is going up and up and up. And we will end up having a challenge of how to model our repositories. It seems that Fedora Commons cannot cope with more than 100 million entries, and we will get there. So that's a challenge maybe for you. Now the services, and there we need to understand that the searches that we want to make are not just metadata search, but also content search. I mean, in the real text, when I say, you know, like for the gestures and so on. So it's really, it's both. You will often use the metadata to find the important resources that you want to use, but sometimes you don't know what they are. You don't know what the characteristics are, so you would simply go and search in the whole database for certain things without first using the metadata. So we need to, we have applications of advanced language and speech technology tools, and they have to work in a service-oriented architecture, which is located in different places physically. but I suppose this is no big deal. And it's operating on those distributed and non-uniform collections, that's worse. And it has to be combinable into workflows. So we need to have interoperability standards to make everything fit together. And again, this comes back all the time, usability for the non-expert user. And we talked about this morning already, also about the innovation. I mean, one thing is execution, one thing is to make sure this works, but we also need to be aware when we need, or need to be able at least to accommodate new tools and resources wherever they come from. The next challenge I wanted to look at is the legal issues, because since we work with all those language-based material, a lot of, modern literature, all the newspapers and so on, they are not prepared to give their data away for open access. So that needs to be protected by licenses. They are prepared, or at least sometimes we can negotiate that they are prepared to give it to the researchers, but then it needs to be, as I said, protected by licenses. Now, of course, there are very, very heterogeneous across Europe, heterogeneous access and licensing systems. There are different national IPR legislation. And for the time being, we believe that the access is too limited. As the e-IRG, we have promised to work towards open access as much as possible. But of course, we cannot fight the national licensing IPR legislation systems. So there we may need some help in this. I think I just mention it all the time whenever I have a chance, because we need to raise awareness that here we have a serious problem. So we need uniform access and authentication. Of course, we are using WAVE here in Denmark and similar things in the other countries. And we need a licensing system which is as lightweight as possible. We have already in the preparatory phase made a first step, but we would like to work further on with that. And then we need to work for more open access. Now, this is a challenge as well, the sustainability. I think during yesterday and today, I've listened a lot to things that I feel are not sustainable, or where I don't see it. Since we became an e-IRG, I'm more happy, because one of the main ideas of the e-IRG is simply to make sure this is something that runs. It's not a project thing, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, but you ought to be able to look into a further future. But we have a problem when we look at sustainability that we do not have a systematic register system for data and tools. We need to have that. We have a lot of legacy material and legacy tools that we need to either throw away or convert and make work in this new environment. And digital sustainability is relatively new for many centers and users. It's not something that you have thought about. I mean, if I think how much data I have actually, even me, I have things on paper tapes, and I have things on cards, and I have things on various types of other media. So it's something we really need to think about. So what I put here as challenges is we need persistent identifiers. It has to be so that an experiment can be repeated. If somebody made an experiment with a specific resource and a specific tool under specific circumstances, we should be able to repeat it, just like in the natural sciences. This is not something humanities researchers often do, but this is something we need. So we are subscribing to persistent identifiers. And we need to be able to follow the technological evolution so that we will always convert into the next one. And then computing centers need to be able to issue long-term guarantees on web services and data repositories. And by long-term, I mean like 50 years or so. We don't want to make something which is obsolete or will be abandoned in a few years' time. That's a total waste of money. So for computing, I don't think I can tell you a lot. I mean, what we've seen about computing has been much more demanding than what we're asking for. But many of the new resources like videos and audios and so on are actually a little bit demanding. Many of the new tools and techniques are statistical, and they do require some computation. But I think we can. Coffee is also approaching. I just wanted to mention another challenge, which is what we call the knowledge sharing and education as well. The Clarion national teams have different expertise, of course. Here in Denmark, we know a lot about the Danish language, that's obvious. But we also know, that's more by accident maybe, that we know something about annotating multimodal gestures. We know something about word nets and ontologies and so on. And that's different in the various countries. And we need to collaborate and to make all this work. And it's really important to teach our students so to make sure that the next generation is well prepared. And here again, we get back to something which is organizational and governance. Teams are scattered, and how do we find enough researchers to take this teaching and knowledge sharing on? Now, on cooperation, I thought that we could say that there are many research infrastructures in the EU and also internationally, it's for us now, since we are now an e-IRG, it's more easy. An e-IRG is a legal entity. A project is not a legal entity, but an e-IRG is. So it's more easy for us now to be able to enter into agreements with other parties, and I think that's really nice. But we do have some challenges where we need to ensure the linking capabilities between the research infrastructures at the national level, the EU level, and international level. I think we already touched upon that yesterday. And maybe this is a good forum for that, we could think about a broader collaboration platform at the European and then afterwards also at the national level. But one thing I wanted to say to you about Clarion is that it's very lean at the e-IRG level. We've made sure that the e-IRG level is very, very small, so that people do not have to pay too much in order to become a member. And this means that there is not a lot of finances at the e-IRG level. All the finances stay at the national level. And I just have made, I'm approaching my last slide. I thought that maybe I could sum up the Clarion requirements here, because that might be good for the discussion. We have 9 members currently, and I've given you the list, and I told you earlier that the Netherlands is the host country. We have in our strategic work plan, we have said that we'd like to have 15 members in 3 years' time and 20 in 5 years' time. As I told you already, I told you why it is important to have more members. This is not true for all research infrastructure. Sometimes it's easier to just have 3 members to do the job, but here we really need this broad participation. We do have 3 or 4 members that are just waiting to have their formalities sorted out. We have Norway and Croatia that are not members of the EU, and then they need to acknowledge the e-IRG, and so that's this kind of thing, but they already have provided the national funding. We have Finland. They have another problem, but that's also a formal problem. I'm sure Finland will join in a very, very short time. So the funding for Clarion comes from the national sources. There's no EU funding for the time being. We do hope that in Horizon 2020 maybe we could get some support, but for the time being it's really all national. So there's a fee, and then there's the in-kind contribution. And then, as I said, we have tried to keep the fee as small as possible, just to make sure the secretariat can work and so on. So most of the money stays in the in the member states. And one of those things, one of the national in-kind contributions is a data and service center, or there could be more centers, like in Germany, there will be more centers, so it can be distributed. They have to host the data, they have to provide the services 24 hours per day, 7 days per week, and they would also have to be responsible for the authentication, authorization, and access that we just talked about earlier, and also for entering the federation so that we can work across borders. And then they're also responsible for giving this long-term guarantee. And well, here I put the 50 years. I don't know if anyone, I've not met anyone yet who is prepared to do it, I think. But this is something of that kind that we need. And in some countries, universities have such centers, and in other countries, there are dedicated data and service centers, like in Finland, we have the CSC. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bente. Questions? Yes.
Are there different user rights? Are there users who can access data through a portal, and others can write annotations, and others can even work on their own workshops, workflows?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that's the way it is. You know, I would have been happy also to show you. I mean, there are some implementations, but there will be different user rights. There are people who can upload things. We don't want everyone in the world to be able to upload and so on. And this is all organized through the WAVE system. One of the problems with WAVE is that it's not all universities in Denmark that have implemented those roles that you get in exactly the same way. For instance, a PhD student, is that a staff member or a student? Because students have rights that are different from researchers.
Do users need a personal certificate for constructing workflows?
No, I think, although this is just something that's coming up, yeah. Normally it would all be controlled through the authorization system, so through WAVE, the roles that you have there.
I see the long-term guarantee, this sustainability. 50 years is really impressive, yeah. Was it given on a governmental level, or
no?
How you define the 50 years?
I think it's also a provocation. But I think what we wanted to say is that we want really to look very far into the future, and 5 or 10 years is certainly not enough. If it's 50 or 30, I will not argue on that one.
Okay. Final question before coffee?
I'm interested in what you mentioned, old data. From what we know, digitization of large-scale data started in about 95 or so, 1995. People are very much interested in the previous 100 years or so. Has your project undertaken some particular effort in this direction?
We will take any data that's provided by the users. So, but yeah, that's the way it is. Yeah, I'm sorry, but we do have, for the time being, in the Danish database, we have some text from 16th century. That's the oldest we have at present.
Okay, then I can happily announce coffee, and please try to be back here in 20 minutes, so 1:30. Thanks again, Mette.